Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today is a very special session. It's called Over the Horizon, and this is where I'm going to give you some insights on where I think the market is going in the next 6 and 12 months' time, so you can look over the horizon and predict what it is that you're going to do in your market journey. Now, in doing so, I have to be super clear. I need to give you, I guess, a warning that this is educational in nature only. And I should put a little disclaimer up that actually says that. And have I got one? There it is, right there, educational in nature only. This is not advice. I can't give you advice, folks. I'm not licensed to give you advice, but rather what I want to show you is how I read the market, okay? How I use the difference between a property indicator and a property driver to actually to understand how to read the market, and how I use drivers to predict the future, and how I use indicators to look back on the past. And by doing the two, if I predict the future, then wait some time, then look back, I get to see if I'm right. And by doing that over and over and over, practice and repetition, I'm able to actually, so far, I've been able to successfully navigate where I think the market is actually going. So in 35 years of both property investing and also property development, I guess this is how I've fine-tuned my property journey and being able to predict where I think the market's going. Either way, you need to get your own, I guess, independent advice. So this is not accounting, legal, or financial advice. So please make sure that you check in with your experts. So that said, where do I think the market's going? Well, I'm going to show you over the next little bit as to where I think it's going. And in doing so, I actually covered this in a great level of detail in an event I ran literally just weekend called Developer Launchpad, which I run about twice a year. And so rather than repeating absolutely every bit of that Launchpad event right here, what I thought I'd do is actually slice and dice that video recording and actually edit it in here, so you guys can actually watch just that market update section from there. Now, before getting you all the way through to the end, let me give you the punchline. The punchline is, I think that the market is going to the moon, and this is our chance to buy low, do our development process, get profit from the development process, and then sell high into a rising market. The potential to, I guess, increase our profits and potentially even double it by doing that. But I guess we always have to be cautious and careful in everything that we do. Make sure that we actually educate ourselves in what to do. Make sure that we're actually doing it safely. That said, just giving you some heads up, I've had lots of feedback since the Launchpad, people actually asking about our property development formula education program. So what I thought I'd do is I'll give you the link below. If you find this information, I guess this education I'm going to give you informative and helpful, and actually help you on your journey, then I encourage you to put an application in below. It's an application-only process. We don't let everybody in. There's some pretty strict criteria in it. That said, folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you over to the pre-recording of Developer Launchpad, and I'm going to touch base with you at the very end to see what your thoughts are. Till then, bye for now. I want to talk to you about how to actually start to read the market, okay? There is a thing called an indicator, there is a thing called an indice, and a thing called a driver, okay? Now, when we start to look at these, this is how people start to read the market, okay? Now, when we start to look at this, traditional investors tend to use market indicators to measure what has actually happened in the market, okay? Now, barbecue investors don't put that level of effort in. They tend to use indices just for a little bit of a feel of what's actually happening in the market. But savvy investors and developers, that's you guys, I hope, by the end of this session, you use the market drivers to predict what is actually going to happen next, okay? Now, that's super important that you actually do that, because by understanding where the market is going, our projects, when we get into them, can run from anywhere from, you saw mine was 6 weeks, but they can run anywhere up to 2, maybe even 3 years. So you need to start to look at, where is our market actually going? So that's what I'm going to start to go into now. I'll show you how to start to read the market, how to predict where that's actually going. Now, I want you to remember in what it is that I'm actually going to teach you here, that there are markets within markets within markets, okay? So there are at the statewide level, there's at a regional level, there's at a capital city level, there's even suburb wide, and then within the suburb, there is also the dwelling type. So when we're putting something like this together, you need to start to apply it to your particular circumstances, okay? So this is not about, hey, one answer is the answer. You've got to be very subjective to say what's happening in my local area for the product that I intend to actually create. Okay, so let's talk about indicators versus indices. So now an indicator measures what has already happened. Okay, so this is what most property market commentators actually will start to talk about is property indicators. So auction clearance rates, median house prices, those sorts of things. So it's very hard to predict the future when you're looking backwards at things that have actually happened. A property indices is actually based on the indicators. They're a lot easier to actually digest. They're typically an infographic, make it very easy to actually understand. But what we're going to be talking about is property drivers. They are the things that cause the market to actually move. And so if you understand there are 16 actual drivers that are actually sitting here, if you understand those 16, then you'll know how to predict the future. So let's look at an indicator and why an indicator is not a good use of how to predict where the market is actually going. It's used by most property commentators out there to report on what's actually happening in the market. The media typically report on these, okay? So the media can only talk on the facts of what has actually happened and they try to hype it actually up, okay? But when you start to hear the taxi driver tell you what's going on, then you know that you've actually missed the market. So the problem with these is they lag, okay, because it's measuring something that's already happened. So auction clearance rates might have happened on the weekend, but the decision to sell that property could have been made anywhere up to 6 months earlier, okay? Now, because of that, okay, people start to think about selling, then they have to seek out their agents, then they have to go and actually get the market ready for sale, do all the marketing campaign, then run the home opens, then somebody has to sign a contract, then you have to wait for settlement. So by the time you do that from start to finish, that can take anywhere up to 6 months from the decision to actually sell to the result actually being able to be measured. So when you're using an indicator, remember that you're measuring a lag in the sentiment of the market that was anywhere from 3 to 6 months ago, okay? Now, the kinds of market indicators, okay, there are 4 different categories. So 4 categories of indicators. So the stock availability, then there's investment stock, stock turnover measures, and the market sentiment. So 4 different categories. And you can see here, listing volumes is going to tell you, so how many properties are actually for sale, how many sales actually happened, and how much stock is sitting there on market and going stagnant. So, you know, so the 4 categories are super important to actually start to track. I'm going to show you a little bit of a shortcut in how to read the market using indicators. And then I'm going to show you why that's just a little bit behind the times, okay? Then we get to market indices. So market indice is a little bit easier to actually digest. It's often presented as infographics, as I said. So Heron Todd White have a thing called the property clock. CoreLogic have a thing called the Hedonic Index. And PRD has the Australian Property Growth Map and a whole bunch more like that. So those things are graphical. So because of that, they lack a little bit in detail. They're also based on a lagging indicator, which means that you put a lag on top of a lag by the time you actually go and produce these. And they're usually not going down to that local macro level, which is the local economy. So this is an example of an indice. It's showing the market clock. So this is the latest clock from Heron Todd White. And you can see that they think that there's bottom of the market is Sydney, for example, and that Brisbane is sitting over here. Here we go at the 3 o'clock mark on its way down. So now I'm going to show you why I think that's actually a lagging indicator in a couple of minutes. Okay. Market drivers, on the other hand, these are what causes the market to move. Okay. And this is super important that you actually understand this. When you start to understand all the facets that actually go into it, you can actually start to predict it. What's wrong with them? Well, it's not black and white to interpret. It's not pure numbers, okay? But rather you need to be very, very aware of what's actually happening in the market. You need to pay attention to all facets of the media, the market, and a whole bunch more. And I'm going to show you some of the key resources that I actually use to get there. And there's no single source of data, so you need to collate data from lots of different data sources. And when you do, you're going to get the outcomes, okay? Now, here's a quick hack on how to read the market using a market indicator. So this is courtesy of a gentleman by the name of John Lindeman, fantastic property commentator and economist. So if you're wanting to know, I guess, a little bit of how to read the market, John's got some really fantastic things. Now, what he said is with 2 indicators, the sales and the listings, we can start to see and start to predict what's actually happening in the market. So if the sales and the listings are both going up, then it's a confident market, okay? And as as properties are listed, they're selling super quick, and as that escalates, it starts to become super confident. The opposite is concerned market, where they're both actually going down. But where it gets super interesting is where they are crisscrossing. So where you've got more listings than sales, that means people are starting to get desperate and they're trying to sell it. And it only takes 1 or 2 people to sell at a discount, and the property market can actually crash. And then the opposite is that as the market is starting to boom, there's not many listings because people are holding on for it to actually hit the peak of the market before they actually buy. So you'll see lots of sales as soon as they come on, but hardly any listings because people are trying to hold on and ride the market. So let's have a look using these indicators, what that starts to represent around the country. So in Sydney, we can see here that we've got, see if I can actually bring myself back up in the corner. There you go. Sydney, we can see here that it was going in an upward trend, and now it's going into a neutral trend, okay? So this is for the listings. Now, very similar for Melbourne, was going up and is now going slightly down, but starting to tend towards neutral. In Brisbane, very similar, was going up and then going sideways. And in Adelaide, again, was going up and pretty much very, very slight downwards turn. So from a listings perspective, everything's slowing down, okay? Not as many listings that are actually starting to go there. When we look at our sales volumes, okay, this is a rolling 6 monthly average. And sorry, this one's the 6 monthly average, and this is the actual sales on a monthly volume perspective. But you can see a downward trend, and you can see that a downward trend on the number of volumes of sales, okay? So when we start to look at those, that tends to indicate that it was crashing. So when we saw the upwards on one and the downwards on the other, that was crashing. But now it's starting to come to neutral, and which means that the market is about to do something, and we're trying to work out what that something actually is. So, but is it too early to tell? So are the indicators actually saying that we've actually started to turn? So has the market turned? I want to hear from you guys. Do you believe that we have turned? And if we've turned, do you believe that we're going slightly down or slightly up? So people saying yes, that we have turned. On the edge, going up. Yes, people are saying going up. Well, let's have a look at the results here, shall we? So if I start to look at this, these are the results. In the last 3 months, we have been going up pretty much across the board. Now, I can see a couple of people saying, hey, what about Perth? And Perth is very similar. So, but I guess for the moment, I'm going to concentrate on these 4 cities being where we run our events, but also the fact that this is where more than 80% of Australia's population actually is. So we're going to concentrate on these 4, but hopefully the principles you guys can apply and put that into pretty much any market. So have you been paying attention? I guess going to have another prize draw now. So have you been paying attention? So for a PDN annual membership, I'm going to say, how many categories of indices are there? How many categories? So the answer is 4 categories. I'm going to say Arvind. Arvind had 4. So Arvind, you are the winner there. So thank you, folks. Say hello, Arvind. If you could reach out to Shelley, please, mate, that would be greatly appreciated. So what we're going to talk about now, I'm going to talk about market drivers. Okay, so the market drivers are the things that actually move the market forward. So now, in order to do this, this helps us to predict our future demand. Okay, so as we start to do this, there are, again, 4 categories. Government incentives. Okay, so major infrastructure projects and cash incentive bonuses. Population growth and a whole bunch of things there. Interstate, intrastate, births, deaths, and marriages. Supply and demand, development approvals, building approvals, construction approvals, those sorts of things, and then purchasing power. Those 4 categories. So unemployment rates, interest rates, etc. So I'm going to go through every single one of them. There's actually 4 categories and 16 different drivers that we're going to start to look at those 16 different drivers today and go through I guess, how to actually start to assess them. Okay. And when you understand those drivers, you can then see how to see where the demand is. And it's based on a very simple concept. Okay. So the concept is a headwind and a tailwind. Now, we've all heard of the concept of
when the wind is in your face, a headwind, it's really hard to walk up the street, okay? And so it's pushing us back. It's something that's working against us, whereas a tailwind is the wind that's actually sitting behind us and actually starting to push forward, okay? So I'm going to look at every single one of those 16 drivers, and we're going to look at that concept of headwinds and tailwinds, okay? So as we start to look at it, there's a key here. So the tailwind is going to be green, neutral is going to be orange, location specific. So in Brisbane, it might be one answer. In Sydney, it might be another answer, for example. And then a pure headwind. We're going to start to apply that against our 16 different categories. And it's going to start to look something like this, okay? So these are my previous predictions from last time round. And what you can see, so 18 months ago, we had more tailwinds than headwinds, and that's when we actually had our property boom. Then we had a whole bunch more headwinds than tailwinds, and that's when our market economy slowed. Then it's slowed down again. But what we're going to be looking at today is where are we actually going to be going in the next, I guess, 6 to 12 months, and where do we think the market is actually going, okay? So who here has seen me show you these 16 drivers before? So just smash in there if you've seen that before. Absolutely. And you guys get plenty from that. So are you guys doing it yourself now? That's what I want to know. The whole point of me teaching you this stuff is so you can actually do it for yourselves. Okay, let's start to have a look. Okay. Now, bonus points. You'll get bonus points if you use your market drivers to predict the future. Then you wait 6 months and you look backwards at the market indicators. And what you're going to do there is you're going to start to confirm whether or not what you were predicting actually came true. And if you do that regularly enough and consistently enough, then you're going to start to reinforce your learnings and go, okay, this is where I thought it was going. It actually went there. I'm actually then now actually able to read the market. Okay, so now let's have a look. Government incentives. Now, there has been a bucket load of government incentives sitting out here. There is major infrastructure projects out the wazoo. As a matter of fact, we've got well over 200 odd infrastructure projects totaling about, I think it's $156 billion, something like that. So there's major infrastructure projects everywhere. So you can see here the amount of money that's actually being, I guess, proposed in our pipeline. So we can see these announced are ones that are just about to take off. Detailed planning on these, look, there's 65, well, that's probably more about $80 billion that are actually in the detailed planning stage, plus a whole bunch more in the pipeline. So we are going to have years and years and years of major infrastructure projects. Now, what does major infrastructure projects do? Well, that creates, I guess, jobs in areas, okay? When it creates jobs in areas, then those people start to spend money in those areas. When they start to spend money in those areas, then other businesses start to benefit from that. So it's called trickle-down economics. So it's super important to understand how many jobs are actually being created and how much money is actually being spent in those areas. So if we go back to the slides here, we can see here by labor demand, we can see now we're somewhere in this vicinity here. Okay, so we can see that there is a bucket load of labor demands, so way over and above the actual labor that we actually have. So we don't have enough skilled labor at the moment. So you can see here we've got an overcommitment. We need 40% more skill set than we actually have available in our market, which creates a whole bunch of demand for people to come back into the industry and those sorts of things. So we're a little bit low on skilled labor at the moment. So that's hence why population growth is bringing in a whole bunch of skilled labor. Now, if we have a look at this from a expenditure perspective, so we're somewhere in this vicinity here. Have a look at the billions and billions of dollars that are currently being spent across the board at the moment. As a matter of fact, there are 18 projects that account for the majority of those infrastructure spends, but every single one of them, I want you to actually start to pay attention, are transport corridors, okay? The West Connects, the Sydney Metro, the Melbourne Metro, Bribie Inland Rail, Westgate Tunnel, Cross River Rail. All of these infrastructure projects are all about transport, okay? When we start to see that start to occur, they are, how do we get people out in the burbs into the workplace, okay? So transport is a really, really big indicator. So when we see these billion-dollar projects, as I said, trickle-down economics means it's going to create many, many jobs in the local community. Many jobs in the community then bring people to the area in order to want to live close to work. And so this process has a little bit of a lag. So when you start to see the billions of dollars being spent in an area, you know that pretty soon there's going to be huge demand for work in the area in all sorts of industries. It then means it's going to be a population increase. Now, the next thing, this was literally announced only 4 days ago, okay? So National Cabinet is set to bring a whole bunch of incentives into the community because they realize that they need 200,000 new homes every year for the next few years, and they know that they can't do that alone. So they are starting to give incentives and bonuses. Now, last time round, it was the building bonus. This time round, they haven't announced what that bonus is actually going to be, but there's lots of bonuses now starting to be incentivize us, which means that as a community, it's going to be better for us to actually start to build things. So when government's spending money, then I guess that's creating opportunity absolutely everywhere. Okay, now let's have a look at where I think that actually lands. So firstly, from a major infrastructure projects perspective, I want you guys to smash in your window. Do you think that is a tailwind, so that is behind us, or a headwind based on the billions of dollars of projects that we're doing? Couple of people saying headwind, couple of people saying tailwind. Most of you are saying tailwind. So it is behind our back. We've got billions of dollars of infrastructure. That's wind behind our back, creating lots of actual jobs. It's also, I guess, the government incentives coming in, the cash incentives that are going to come in the not too distant future means that is a tailwind. Now, right this very second, they've announced that they're going to announce it. So it's not that it's live this very, very second. So let's actually have a look at that. So we're going to start to see these incentives start to come in. They are going to be tailwinds behind us. Which means that pretty soon we're going to have a whole bunch of population, a whole bunch of opportunity in those areas. The next thing we're going to look at is population growth, okay? So the population growth is the number of people that are actually going to be moving into areas, and that's going to change based on all sorts of things. What's creating our demand is the number of people actually living here. Now, the reality is right now, we're somewhere around the 25 million people mark in Australia, but our projections are that by 2064, we'll be somewhere near 49 million people. So all of those people need somewhere to go, okay? That somewhere to go means that they're actually going to need some housing to actually sit in. So there's a huge amount of demand that are coming our way over the next few years. As a matter of fact, the next 4 years, they're predicting 400,000 people as our growth, okay? So when we start to look at our population growth rate, we're starting to get back to record growth numbers. And the reason for that, we closed our borders for quite some time, hence that drop. And now we've reopened them and we're trying to bring skilled migrants into our area. So that all that means is massive opportunity for lots of people coming in, meaning lots of demand, okay? Now, net overseas migration is where most of them are actually starting to come from. We can start to see here that huge amounts of demand that actually have been coming from net overseas migration. We had this small amount disappear through COVID, as I said, and then it kept on going. Now, where are they actually coming from? What is all the population growth being? So what we can see in the light blue, natural increase, that's birth, deaths, and marriages, okay? Then we've got internal migration. So internal migration, so Brisbane is getting huge amounts of, so this is interstate migration, but you can see Melbourne and Sydney is where they're all coming from. So they're getting out of Sydney, getting out of Melbourne and moving to southeast Queensland. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no demand in Sydney and Melbourne. You can see that the demand is still very, very strong for lots of new houses. But very similar everywhere else. But Brisbane is going to get a massive, I guess, upkick from, I guess, the interstate migration, whereas Sydney and Melbourne are going to get a down kick for those, okay? Population growth, when we start to look at this, we've got natural increases, which is the blue one, this dark blue one, but it's the the international migration, the overseas migration that's really driving all of this population growth increase. So when we start to look at all of that, when we start to see the age groups and that sort of thing that they're all coming in for, we can start to see the kind of demographics that we need to be starting to build stock for as well, okay? So what I'm keen to hear from you guys based on those little bits of information, interest intrastate, so regional, we're not seeing much changes there. So I'm picking that as pretty neutral, but interstate migration. So if you are in Southeast Queensland, do you think that is a headwind or a tailwind? Okay, tailwind if you're in Southeast Queensland. If you think that you're in Sydney, do you think that is a headwind or a tailwind? Headwind, absolutely. And so international migration, do we think that's a headwind or a tailwind? So tailwind, absolutely. So let's have a look at where I think those stats are actually going to land. So neutral for interstate migration, location specific for interstate migration, and for international, very much a tailwind. So we're starting to see a pattern here, aren't we, folks? Can we start to see that our tailwinds are starting to come in our direction? Who can see that? Absolutely. So now we're still not finished our analysis. The next parts are the super interesting parts, where we start to look at I guess the supply and demand side of things. But before we do, I want to do another free giveaway. So another free giveaway. So annual membership. Now, even if you are already an annual member, then we can give you a voucher so that you can actually renew that for next time for free. So what question should I actually ask here? Okay, so for I'm going to say for an annual membership, I'm going to say infrastructure spending. Actually, no, I'm going to ask a very different question. If you are in Melbourne, do you think there is a headwind or a tailwind for interstate migration in Melbourne? Okay, that'll be the question. So I'm looking for Andrew. Whoops, no, there's too many Andrews. Sorry, I didn't get the surname fast enough. See if I can find him very quickly. Andrew. Okay, just stop typing in the chat window, please, folks. Every time you do that, it goes scrolling past. I cannot find Andrew. My humble apologies, Andrew. I'm trying to find the Shelley, can you find the first Andrew that went whizzing past, pretty please?
Was it Andrew Antibus?
Yes, that's the one. Thank you. Sorry, that was a little clunky on my side, folks. My humble apologies. Let's start to look at supply and demand now, okay? So as we look at supply and demand, there are lots of things that actually go into this. So building approvals. Now, building approvals, I want to be super clear here, and this is going to sound very counterintuitive, okay? Building approvals that we think are building approvals, the Australian Bureau of Statistics actually is actually what we think is a development approval. So when we see building approval, it is actually the potential for supply, okay? So these stats here from the Australian Bureau of Statistics are development approvals rather than, so the name is actually a little bit misleading. But I want you to see a couple of yellow spots and a green spot. So the first slump, there were actually a whole bunch of slumps that actually happened here. One, firstly, this was pre-COVID. We're actually in a depressed economy at that point in time. And then we went into COVID. And so the number of people who actually did development approvals in that point of time massively dropped off, okay? We also went through COVID. Our economy shut down. Everything got locked up super hard. And so this is the time when we're talking about 20 or 30% drops in the market. That's what the banks were actually predicting. And so nobody wanted to get into any developments at that point in time because they weren't sure where the bottom of the market was actually going to be. Then the government realized that was actually not going to plan. So the next thing that happened was there was, I guess, a building boom. At that point in time, government printed money for the housing bonuses. 25K housing bonuses. So we had a surplus in approvals, all then get chewed up at that particular point in time, okay? So as fast as we could get development approvals, the actual construction approvals or construction commencements then started to consume those. And then we went into a second wave slump because the costs of building and construction went up to the point where deals didn't make sense anymore. So we've got a massive, massive window here of undersupply, or the lack of potential undersupply. Okay. And I cannot stress that enough. A lack of potential undersupply. And that is a window that's about 2.5 years wide. Okay. So it's going to take a long time for that undersupply. It's about to hit our market right now to say, well, all of that undersupply now means that we actually don't have stock available to actually start to sell. And that's what we're going to see in 2 seconds time. Okay. So when we start to look at home loan approvals, nobody's actually commencing home loans. We can see where all of that building boom happened, but we're not constructing as much anymore at the moment. So home loan approvals are actually down quite a bit. So you guys tell me, where do you think those two actually start to land when we start to look at building approvals? That lack of supply, is that a good thing or a bad thing for us? Is that a headwind or a tailwind? Come on, folks, give me some heads up on this. Everyone, there's a whole bunch of you, headwinds, tailwinds. Well, I'm gonna give you the results of that in a couple of secs, but that lack of supply means that there's a huge amount of pressure going onto the demand side of things. Now, the demand side of things, the next part to this equation from a demand side of things is the actual construction industry health itself, okay? Now, the construction industry is our biggest market, our biggest employer by a long way. So there are $202 billion worth of investments that actually go into that economy. It employs 1.4 million people work in property in some way, shape, or form. So that could be a property manager, could be a salesperson, could be construction, could be a whole bunch more. So it is a massive, massive industry, which means that the government have to keep that afloat. Our entire economy is actually based on the property industry. Now, one of the things here, building costs, we can see building costs were through the roof, went up nearly 30% in some areas over the last 18 months or so. But you can see that the cost of construction is starting to come down. Now, it hasn't come all the way down, and it is going to remain up for quite a period of time. As a matter of fact, the cost of construction over the next 12 months or so, according to Rawlinson's, I guess anywhere from 5 to 8%, depending upon where you are, increase in construction costs in the not too distant future. So anyone doing feasibilities, you need to actually factor that into your feasibilities and make sure that, hey, the cost of the construction that was 18 months ago is not going to happen again. Okay, so we're coming to a new normal now. So what they're predicting though is in 6 to 9 months time, that should start to stabilize and no longer have the continued increase in costs along the way. Now, what does that mean? I guess what that means, it had a direct impact on dwelling commencements. So dwelling commencements is the actual construction itself. So as I touched on before, property market slump, we didn't have any commencements. Then we had the COVID crash. Then we had a bucket load of commencements. And now you can see that we're in another slump. So basically, we're in a situation where we've had a ton of development approvals not happen. Okay, so the existing development approvals that were sitting there, typically there's always a surplus of development approvals and they are being consumed as fast as they're actually being created at the moment, okay, which is creating a whole bunch of pressure on us. So let's have a look at where I think that is actually going to land here. Okay, so in the next 6 months or so, we're still slowly turning on this because the government announcements haven't actually said, well, what are those incentives actually going to be? But in 12 months' time, I think every developer in town is actually going to be back in the market, actually getting development approvals. The building approvals is then going to start to take off because there's going to be a whole bunch of supply and demand because we haven't had those constructions commencements. We're getting a huge amount of demand on that. Because of the population growth that's actually coming from our previous step. Okay, and finance approvals, you're going to start to see a lot of people then starting to, I guess, purchase our finished product off of us. Okay, so all in all, everything's looking good in 12 months' time. Yes, Okay, let's now look at purchasing power. Now, purchasing power is probably one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have, because right this very moment, inflation is up, okay? Inflation up means that the government needs to slow our economy down because they need to, because otherwise what it does is it creates a whole bunch of problems with regards to low unemployment. We get high inflation, the cost of goods are actually high. So what the government is trying to do is keep a slow and steady path as to how we want to go. And what that's, if we can do that, the economy won't overstimulate and it won't understimulate. So we need a slow and gradual growth. The problem is that we haven't had that for quite some time. Now, the RBA have a guide as to where they want that line to actually be. So somewhere in the 2 to 3% mark. That came about all the way back in 1992 when we had a whole bunch of very unstable economy at that point in time. And they put these controls in place to say that they want to aim for inflation to be at that 2 to 3% mark. We had that for quite some time, but you can see back in 2016, our economy started to struggle quite significantly. And so they had to drop our interest rates accordingly because we just weren't growing in our economy. Then we overshot the mark massively from an inflation perspective. And so now what the RBA is trying to do is actually control that, okay? Now, the only way that they can control that is with interest rates. And you can see our interest rates have gone up significantly over this time, causing a whole bunch of pain for a whole bunch of people. But there is some people that were fortunate enough to have actually locked in some interest rates at I guess the very, very low, 2.5% mark some time ago, but they're all starting to come to an expiry. So there's a thing in the media that they're calling the mortgage cliff. I'm going to be talking to that a little bit later on this afternoon. But basically, when people are getting to the end of that, they're starting to get to the point where they're starting to be a little bit in distress. Now, if we start to look here, this is, I guess, from the RBA. It's telling us how much of our money is actually going towards our mortgage investments. So you can see that most of it's going, this light blue is the interest. So before we're putting a whole bunch of principal away and some extra savings, not anymore. Our savings are being eroded very, very fast. And so we're in quite a bit of danger at the moment as to whether or not we actually will, some people will actually get mortgage distress, so it can actually be quite challenging, okay? Unemployment rates also are all the way down. We're record unemployment lows, but as inflation starts to come back, the unemployment rate will actually go opposite, as strange as it will actually sound, okay? The key to all of those from an interest rates perspective is to look at this one here. And we can see here, this is what our consumption rates were. 12 months ago, we were doing really well. Everyone had a lot of surplus money before the interest rates, and so everyone was spending that. Now they're not spending it, okay? So our household disposable income has gone down massively. So we don't have disposable income anymore. So that's why a lot of people are starting to get to the point of mortgage distress. So the billion-dollar question, where do we think our interest rates are actually going? Well, the RBA has a thing called a forward announcement. So what they do every month is they say whether or not they're actually putting the interest rates on hold or otherwise, and then why, and their justification. So what I've done is I've pulled some extracts out of here so you can start to interpret what it means. So firstly, it says interest rates have been increased by 4 percentage points since May last year, okay? Higher interest rates are starting to work to stabilize everything, okay? Inflation in Australia is starting to decline, but it's still too high at the 6% mark. So but they have forecast that it's going to drop to around 3.25% by the end of 2024, okay? And be back within that 2 to 3% range where they really want it to be by late 2025. So we're in for a good 2 years of higher rates, but starting to ratchet down as we start to get our inflation back under control, okay? But returning inflation back to that reasonable timeframe is the RBA's intent. So their intention is to make sure that they are constantly monitoring, and they'll keep those interest rates up for as long as they feel it's actually appropriate. Okay, now what they've said here, the outlook for household consumption is a little bit uncertain, okay? Many households are starting to experience pain, okay? So, whoops, hit the wrong button there, sorry about that. and they're starting to get squeezed on finances because the interest rates are starting to hurt. But some are still actually able to afford it because they had substantial cash reserves. So we're starting to get into a point where we've got a two-tier economy with regards to what's happening in our property market, okay? So, which means that there are going to potentially be some people then start to come to distress, okay? So they have indicated that they are happy to do some further tightening if need be, okay? But they remain resolute in bringing it onto target. Now, all of that said, what it's really trying to say is, look, there's another 18 months worth of pain from an interest rates perspective, but we're going in the right direction. And if we go in the right direction at the right speed, they will potentially look to soften it. So what are the banks predicting are going to be the outcome of all of this, okay? So 3 of the 4 big banks have predicted that we're not going to have any more interest rate rises, I should say. The only exception to that was Westpac. So Westpac said, NAB, I should say, who thought there would be 1 more rate rise. And the rest of them are starting to predict that in March next year, we might get our first cut, okay? Now, as we start to get our first cut, that's going to start to take some pressure off of things. So those people who are in a little bit of distress from a mortgage perspective, they've got to start to look at, can they make it through to March for that first rate cut? And how big will that be if that starts to occur? And how long will it start to take until it starts to soften, okay? So people are saying screen's not advancing, is that right? Sorry about that, folks.
Still on the bank predictions on rates slide?
Yep, that's the right one. That's the right slide.
Great.
Yep. So, but I will bring it back to me. That was the right slide. So a little bit more pain, but stabilized right now. Then it's going to potentially soften with Commonwealth Bank, the Westpac and ANZ all predicting that we should have potentially 3 rate drops in the latter half of next year, okay? So we've got 6 months before anything happens, and then rate drops before the end of the year, which will then start to give us about 18 months of that hard times before it starts to drop off. So now, how much it drops off, we have to keep an eye on what these things are. They are constantly changing, and that's why I'm trying to teach you how guys to actually do this. So always go and look for the announcements from the banks themselves as to their forward projections, and also look at the RBA notes wherever humanly possible. Now, the next thing is mortgage cliff. Now, you see lots of people actually talking about this in the economy and media, hyping it up pretty bad. There's a lot of reasons that are actually sitting behind this, okay? So going back before COVID, interest rates were fantastic. And you can actually see this blue line here is the fixed interest rates, and the variable interest rates were the red one. So it was much, much cheaper to go onto a fixed interest rate for a period of about 2 years. So a lot of people locked their rates in. Some locked them in for 12 months. Some locked them in for anywhere between 3 and 5 years. But what we're finding is we're actually getting to the point where those expiry dates are now starting to come. So what we can see here is, I guess there's $394 billion worth of fixed mortgage commencements that are actually going to start to come off. $394 billion. That is a lot of money, folks. And when we start to look at when, okay, we are right in the middle of it right now. So most of the mortgages are going to start to come off in June all the way through to December this year. So for anyone for that mortgage cliff to actually hit, it's actually hitting right now. So a lot of people are starting to be in distress. So there are going to be some opportunistic sales that are actually going to start to come through, okay? So if people still have some mortgages, if they've got 500K worth of mortgage right now, they're paying about 810 more than they were before. If they've got $1 million mortgage, they're paying about 1,620 per month more than they were before. So it's creating a whole bunch of distress. As a matter of fact, there's more mortgage stress than we've had in more than 15 years. It's actually quite serious, folks. But is it everyone? The answer is no. A lot of people have weathered the storm. So what we're going to find is most of the economy is actually going to stand true. But just those people that haven't been able to weather the storm, there'll be some opportunistic buying that actually comes through. Okay, and then I've already showed that graph. But what it means is consumer confidence is actually low because they don't know how long these high interest rates are actually going to be there. They're not spending. The economy is starting to slow down. So what does all of that actually mean? What it means is there's going to be a further increase in pressure in interest rates until we're actually stabilized. Okay, so I think we're going to, for the next 6 months or so, we're probably going to be relatively flat, and then we're going to start to slow down. Okay. Some vendors are actually going to start to struggle. Okay, when they start to struggle to pay their mortgage as they start to come off, that might create some opportunistic purchasing. Okay, many vendors, unfortunately, will be forced to sell. Now, what it's not clear is how many will be able to hold on. They've got enough cash reserves to hold on that 18 months before it starts to soften. So we could see a whole bunch of people distressed that are able to just hang on by their teeth. Whereas we might see a whole bunch of opportunistic ones where they just can't make it. So now, depending upon how many start to come on, then start to determine the number of listings. And if we start to see people start to get distressed sales, we might see another drop in the market. Now, if it does, I don't think it's going to be very big. I think it's going to be a very small blip. I don't think it's going to be major. But either way, I guess it's only going to be a very small number of those. So let's start to look at what do I think that starts to look like from an interest rates perspective, folks. So if you think interest rates are going to be neutral or high or tailwind, headwind, where do we think it's going to be? People are saying headwind. It's actually a tailwind. Interest rates are going to start to slow down for us. They're going to be a little bit neutral in the shorter term, but what about unemployment rates? Unemployment rates, as inflation starts to come down, people kind of, I guess, don't employ as many people. So do we think that's a headwind or a tailwind? It's going to be a headwind. And fiscal policy, we didn't touch on fiscal policy, but this is government announcing changes in interest rates and things like that. So these are my predictions of those. So when we look in the next 6 months, folks, when we look at the 6 months, we're going to have a relatively stable environment. Location specific, depending upon where you are. If you are in Melbourne or Sydney, lots of people moving out. If you're in Queensland, lots of people moving in. But largely, we've got 1, 2, depending upon this location, could be 3, 4 tailwinds and a headwind. So we're going to start a slow recovery in the next 6 months or so. But in 12 months' time, it's going to be a really, really big recovery that's actually going to kick us off. So the key takeaways, folks, key takeaways for you guys, okay? Population growth fueled by international migration is going to be the biggest driver on all of this. There's also a bunch of limited supply of stock, and that's because there's been a lack of development approvals initiated before COVID, and then the building bonus consumed those surplus stocks. So we've got a lack of potential supply, plus we've got a little bit of, I guess, impacts from a construction cost perspective. Interest rates are set to slow down for 2024, but government incentives are going to keep on coming. And those government incentives are going to drive and kickstart the economy as much as we can. So that's really the outcome.
Hey folks, and I'm back. Hope you guys got plenty from that. As you can see, my prediction of the market is that this is absolutely going to take off. And we have got a 12-month window to get ourselves ready, to prepare, to do everything humanly possible to set ourselves up for success. Now, given that it takes some time to learn the property development process, and typically it's going to take you somewhere between 6 and 12 months to get through that process, that is going to be perfect timing to actually get in pretty much at the bottom of the market as it starts to skyrocket and go to the moon and back. So if you have any interest at all in learning the property development process, then here is the link to our property development formula program. If you have any interest at all in learning to do that, it is a application only process. So I'm going to encourage you to have a look at what we've got there. If it's of interest at all, then come do that. If not, if you are not ready for that, or if you are too early in your cycle, or you just want to work out is property development for you, then the other thing that I encourage you to do is actually come to one of our upcoming meetups. We run these all the way around the country. So Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, we run these pretty much every weekend of the year. You can physically attend, or you can live stream from anywhere in the country. So no matter where you are, there's no excuse to not progress your property development journey. At those events, we have industry experts talking about different issues and challenges that you're going to face on your journey. There will be town planners, civil engineers, architects, accountants, lawyers, and a whole bunch more. We also have members of our community, typically students, who are going to present to you real deals that will show you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the project, so that you can learn from the fact that we as property developers make money by solving problems. So what we're going to do is we're going to expose you to the problems, show what it takes to actually overcome them, and then you can actually see the numbers, both what was projected and the actual reality of what actually created. So I hope to see you at one of our upcoming meetups, or maybe perhaps inside our property development formula program. Till then, folks, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I'm going to say bye for now. Got to find the right button. Bye.